catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Hi everybody and welcome to the TTL show with Mike and John, and we are joined with our fantastic person who've introduced us is Darren Coxon, and we're going to have a chat about ChatGPT in the class. As you can see, the guardrails, the guidance and good practice. We couldn't think of anyone better. So Darren, do you mind just introducing a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got into AI in particular?
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks for inviting me. It's always a pleasure. I'm not a techie person by background at all. I'm an English teacher, was for about 20 years, head teacher as well. So I was around a few schools. I managed groups of schools for about the last 10 years of my career, mainly sort of groups in the UK and internationally. The reason I got into ChatGPT was I was actually the executive head of a school in Tunisia. British school in Tunisia, and it was when ChatGPT was first released. And I still vividly remember this actually. I remember kind of playing with it. It was like November the 30th, I think it was, when it was first released, 2022. And I remember playing with it over the weekend thinking, this is a big deal. And so the following week I had some staff training and I showed the staff how to use it. So I think we're probably the first school in the world, certainly in the first like tiny percentile of schools in the world to be using it. And we kind of went all in really, and everyone was really excited by it. And it wasn't very good at the time. I mean, we're talking about ChatGPT 3.5. We look back now, we realized it was actually quite bad. But we could see the potential, definitely. And then the following March, GPT-4 was released, and that then suddenly did get quite good. And we collapsed. What happened was actually we worked towards a collapsed curriculum week, and we literally just dissolved the curriculum at the end of the term. And we had students like running with passion projects using AI and working on sustainable development goal projects using AI tools. And it was genuinely transformative, not just in terms of the outcomes, but also just the atmosphere in the school. We had mixed age groups. I told the staff they must not stand at the front of the classroom. And if I saw them, I'd tell them to sit down. Actually, day one, I had to do that. It was quite funny. She looked at me like, really upset. Yeah, no, you sit down. You're not in charge. And I got a year 3 student to lead the rest of the lesson. Did it really well. So that got me really interested in because I saw firsthand, and I led a school, one of the first schools to actually sort of embrace these tools. I could see the transformative potential. And so I made the decision a couple of summers ago to move back to the UK. And so now really what I'm doing is helping schools to use these tools, the leadership, the governance, the teachers, the students, and just exploring how they work and how to use them safely.
Yeah, and I think it's so important. We do need help, don't we? All the teachers with the time that sometimes is limited. That help is huge. I'll quickly, while you've introduced yourself, I'm just going to introduce our show, adverts for the show. So one of the things we've got at the minute is a newsletter that I'd ask everyone to get involved in and sign up to. So 10,000 educators every week are on it. It's got 4 TTR standout shows of the week. Of course, we're going to be there. Where would we not be? Hopefully. And you get exclusive discounts to various bits and pieces. So you can sign up, as you can see below. And then our next one is Fabulous John Cap, which we introduce each time. Loads of CPD professional learning resources on there, and a fantastic place to have a look at. So you can see the website and you get 20% off using that code in a minute. So check it out. Right,
that's a big one.
Onto our first big question.
Yeah.
Go on, go for it, Jim.
So, I mean, you've given us the perspective of where you've come from. So, where do you think we are now? I mean, what's the kind of what are you seeing the current uses of chatbots specifically in the classroom, and where do you see this heading, and what do you see happening, and where do you think this is going?
Yeah, I mean, I would maybe I take a slightly different position to some, in that I don't think there is a great deal of chatbot use in the classroom. I don't see it happening much, and there are several reasons for that. I think there's a lot of nervousness from teachers around using these tools. So around data protections, the security aspects, the safeguarding aspects, nervousness around cognitive offloading, kids using it to do the work so they don't have to, that kind of thing. So I would say in terms of using tools in the classroom, there's not much going on. And certainly the under 13s, virtually none. I mean, primary schools just aren't, which is fair enough. I mean, there aren't that many tools that they can use. So right now, as of, wherever we are, June 2025, 2.5 years, more than 2.5 years now into ChatGPT, there's still not a great deal happening. And I think the other reason is simply around the fact that John, you write about this as well, our education system is so entrenched and so traditional, and it's so moribund, and it's so averse to change, and so challenging to do anything. I remember, this was 20 years ago. So I remember in the classroom 20 years ago, and I remember us talking about project-based learning, and it was almost exactly 20 years ago, maybe 18 years ago, something like that. And I remember us kind of all getting quite excited about project-based learning. And I'm starting to kind of explore it with some of the younger students, but literally the closer they got to exams, you could almost see the kids like, yeah, but when are we actually going to do the real work? This is fun, but when are we going to start learning what we need to learn to pass exams? And I think there's a bit of that as well as this fear that, you're going to start using these new technologies and you're not going to learn the stuff you need. And you're going to, so I think there's masses going on when it comes to classroom use. I think where we're kind of starting to see it, I suppose, is people using wrappers to plan not very good lessons. Generally, I would say most of the use of AI in education is teachers using it to not always very well to save time. There's nothing wrong with that at all. In fact, it's an obvious way in, but it won't transform. Using AI to plan a lesson will not transform education. It might save you time, but it's not going to transform our system. And it kind of annoys me rather that that's the first thing the government talks about when it talks about using AI. It will save teachers time. Yes, but then what?
Yeah.
Do you think that the chatbot style of learning could have one of the implements that changes and changes the education and how we're able to provide for our students?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can now, if you've used it, just one example, stream real time in AI. Google AI Studio has the stream real time feature where essentially you share your screen. There are other tools that do it now, but that was one of the first. And you share your screen with Google Gemini, and you have a conversation. And you can talk about anything. So, I did a demonstration of this just the other week where I had an exam paper open on my screen. And I just said to Gemini, look, just talk me through how to answer this question. Don't tell me the answer. Just talk me through how to answer this question. Did a brilliant job. It was so calm and it was so patient. And it just never, and I kept making deliberately stupid mistakes. And it was just like, yeah, and that's not quite right. Let's just take a step back. And it just talked me through. And it was really done. It did it very well. So I think that sort of very calm, kind, patient, step by step, let's just go through, take as long as you like. No, that's not quite right. Let's just go through that again. Let's take a step back. Let's break it down further. That's the essence of actually good teaching. That's what a good teacher will do. They'll sit with the student, they'll work through, okay, let's just take a few steps back, use bringing metacognition into it. Let's think about the process. AI can do that now. So when people talk about, ChatGPT will never replace teachers, there is an element of truth to that. And there will always need to be a role for caring, kind, supportive, intelligent, thoughtful, critical adults who can teach kids how to think. But in terms of delivering stuff, I just think AI can already do it better than a lot, not all teachers. I mean, some teachers have just got it locked down, but AI can do a damn sight better job than a lot of teachers can, just because it's able to take the time, and it's got the time, and it's not sharing its attention with 30 other kids in the class. It can literally be the tool that one student can use, and it will be infinitely patient, and that actually is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and infinitely available.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, one of the things I think we both talked about, and there is a movement there, is when do students learn? Only between the hours of 9 and 3:30.
Well, half of them don't learn. I mean, that's the other thing. Teenagers can't learn before about 10 a.m. anyway. We know with a circadian rhythm, it's the worst time of the day for them to learn. So yes, that's why your year 7s are always bright and sharp at 9 o'clock in the morning. Sixth form, it's a disaster. 16-year-olds at 9 o'clock in the morning or 8:30. It's just a nonsense. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's not just about being always available and always patient. It's always patient. It's also about being available as and when it's needed, and being this kind of companion, I suppose, to support their learning in a way that just feels comfortable. If you work with one of these chatbots, so this Google Gemini example, I ended that interaction. I actually felt quite good about myself. It's like, do you know what? I learned something there, and actually didn't make me feel bad. It didn't make me feel stupid. It just was kind of there, and it was in the background, and it just kind of gently and with its really nice, kind, calm voice just kind of guided me through. And we're so early as well. This stuff is so early. That screen real time is still an experimental feature. Yeah. It won't be long before it's just available, and kids can just use it, and teachers can just use it, and it's just there, and you just tap a button, and you're just going to have like we're having now, conversation about what's on my screen or what I'm writing or whatever, and it will just help me.
Well, it sits on my phone, and I use it on my phone, like on occasion, and I'll share my screen, I'll share my camera, and ask it, about life in general, and if I've got a problem. One of the things that I thought was really interesting is the patience, and I've had a few symptoms recently where a child might have responded, I don't know it. And
what do you mean you don't know?
Yeah, and I've tried again and again to re-explain it, and no matter how human you are, you will eventually lose your patience when you've got 30 other students you need to support. That AI is not going to lose that at all, and I think that's a really interesting point. My big thing is, I suppose, have you seen it being used, or can you think of a scenario, a lesson where a chatbot, this is the best way we could use it right now?
I mean, just that one example, probably no at the moment, because actually a lot of these tools like AI Studio, like Notebook LM, 18+.
Yeah.
So it still feels like we're in the kind of experimental phase here. I mean, Notebook LM is another good example. The podcast feature, it annoys me that you can have more than 50 languages, but British English can't be one of them. Yeah. Why? I don't know. Why can't you just have a British accent in Notebook LM?
Everything's American, yeah.
Yeah, so it has to be
one American, two of them.
They are kind of irritating. Google hadn't got that right, actually. Not in Notebook LM. I find the voice is quite irritating. So I think that from that side, no. But I think we definitely can start to see being able to train. I mean, some people use GPTs. I'm a bit on the fence about them. I don't think that useful. Copilot we're starting to see. Again, I'm not that hot on Copilot either. I don't think it offers an enormous amount. I've used Copilot Studio, but we will start to see, I think, some new entrants. You've got Magic School. I know, I'm mentioning it because simply it's the only one that allows you to share sort of bots to younger students. There are one or two others, but that's the main one. But I think we will start to see more of these sorts of products just enter the marketplace, because I just think there's a desire, particularly with the under 13s, to start to explore and use them. For the over 13s, we are definitely seeing more and more of them using ChatGPT and Google Gemini, but it's probably more likely to be they're doing it at home, and they're not doing it in the classroom. So I think there's just that, again, going back to the very first thing I said, there's just this general nervousness particularly around security and GDPR and safeguarding, which I think is stopping from lots of schools from using these tools. The other point, of course, around student under 18 use, which is really important, and I don't think people pick up on this enough. And the government have made their position very clear. So they released a paper called Product Safety Expectations. Very exciting title, but it's actually a really useful document, and every school leader should read it. And essentially what it says is, if you're going to bring AI into your school for students to use under 18s, you need to be able to monitor their interactions. There needs to be a safety mechanism to alert staff, call it supervisors. There needs to be, messages to the student if they try and jailbreak it. There need to be sort of messages showing, naughty, all of that kind of thing. That needs to be part of what you bring in. And of course, when you think about that, you think, well, there really aren't that many products that do that. In fact, there are none that do it completely.
Not that I'm aware of.
But then of course you look at in the paper this week in Ireland just debating whether to bring ChatGPT in for their students to use, and I'm thinking, that for me is actually quite irresponsible, because there's no way any teacher, unless they're going to partner with the Irish government and create some sort of wrapper so you can monitor their use, maybe that's what they're going to do. That actually strikes me as being quite irresponsible, because then you're just going to have students using it, and there's no way for teachers to be able to know what they're doing.
So slightly going maybe off topic, it was going back to the legislation. Do you think our government have got it right then when it comes to protecting students, or do you think they've gone a little bit too far to not allow, say, students that are in sixth form to use it more effectively? I don't think there's any real danger. It's guidance rather than policy. That's the first thing to say. It's not a policy document. It's not going to be inspected in that way. It's not like the EU AI Act, which now it's coming into force is going to be, you could have millions of euros fines if you get it wrong. It's not quite that stringent. I think it's just, for me, it feels proportionate. It feels about right. It feels that you should be, as a school, able to monitor. But you're absolutely right. I think it really should be down to the school. When a student reaches sixth form, they're not going to want the teacher monitoring what they do. If they're 11 years old, what I'm hoping to see is a degree of common sense applied, where the school will recognise that once the students reach a certain age, that you need to back off a bit. Maybe still have the monitoring if they start to disclose things like being bullied or self-harm or that kind of thing. That's fair enough. But the actual sort of, I say spying, but the constant monitoring, I think probably will be very good for the under 13s, but probably we'll see a lot of schools backing off a little bit as the students get older.
I was going to say that kind of leads us into, if you were going to give us a top 3 sort of things that schools need to be considering when they're thinking about implementing AI tools in the classroom, what would your kind of like 1, 2, 3? These are the things you need to be considering. Be.
Yeah. So I think it sounds boring, but policy has to come first. You need people need to know what the consensus is. That's all policy is. Policy is just consensus. We've agreed that this is how we're going to use these tools, and this is how we're not going to use these tools, and this is what will happen if we use them incorrectly. There are so many risks attached to AI that you have to get your policy in place, because if you don't, basically you need to create a safe space within which people can experiment and innovate. That's the whole point. What I talk about safe innovation a lot, and that's what I mean. It's like if it's free for all and there are no guardrails, then actually what will happen is no one will use it. If you like do whatever you want, people will be like, well, no, because I just don't know how to use these things. So I think you have to have your policies in place fairly early on. And I do a lot of work with schools all over the world really now on making sure they've got their policies kind of locked down. That feeds up and down. So that's about how the governance works, both the governance of AI, but obviously school governance as well. It's 2 slightly different things. But so it's about the consensus and the rules and what you agree as a school as to how you can and can't use these tools. And I would say that the next most important thing is leadership alignment, because if you don't get the principle has to be bought in. I've noticed this, the schools that have been most successful, that I've worked with are the ones that have got the school principal that's most bought in. And if it's a massive school, like I'm working with one or two very, very large state and independent schools, it matters a bit less because, of course, then you've got your heads of curriculum and your heads of school, and they're almost they're like the COO of the school, and they're the ones actually that are really running the school, whereas the head tends to be a bit more of a figurehead. But if it's the person who's the main decision maker that others are looking to for leadership and guidance, that person doesn't have to be an expert, but they need to be at least bought into, not be resistant. And then the leadership along with that is who's going to sort of kind of lead on the implementation. And then the next level down is actually about who is going to be driving this forward on a day-to-day basis. And that does involve some training, but it also involves things like for forming sort of working parties, planning groups to kind of plan events, or groups to plan like collapsed curriculum day, like week, like we did in Tunisia, those sorts of things. And I think if you do that, you get that momentum going. But if you just get some training for some of your staff, it's just not going to, it'd be good for them, but you're not going to see any sustainable change. So you have to get that alignment at the top and that policy at the top, and then you can sort of trickle down the training. If you do it that way around, it just tends to be more impactful than just what tends to happen in lots of schools, where you get one or two teachers who are using it and feel a bit guilty about it. And then nothing and then good for them, because they can go on to another school and do really well. But I have said this right from the start. I said this more than 2 years ago, and I'm seeing this in real time. I'm seeing this happen time and time again. And there are a few guys who are doing this, and they're obviously really accelerating their own careers. If you are the AI person in your school, and you gain genuine domain expertise as much as you can, then you will be a very, very attractive proposition in the next 3 to 5 years. And you will accelerate your career. You can easily move up the chain incredibly quickly.
I'm just going to start writing my CV again.
Right?
I'm just going to start writing my CV.
Yeah. No, I'm not kidding. It's going to be the most important role in a school. Learning architect, AI governance, trade tools training, safe AI use. Those are the roles that I think are going to be the most valuable roles in a school in the next few years.
So just as a kind of a quick adjunct to that, what are you seeing in terms of the barriers to adoption? Because what are the reasons why you're finding kind of levels of reluctance, particularly at the top of schools? I think a lot of the time it will be because the principal has used ChatGPT when it was first came out, and they thought, well, that's quite bad, and they haven't bothered to look at it again. I think you pick up a lot of AI, anti-AI people. You see it on social media, and they can be very. I mean, I've grown a very thick skin to it now, but they can really. They can be very personal. And I think people are nervous of kind of putting their head above the parapet and saying, actually, I think it could possibly be quite useful, maybe. So I think there's a bit of that. There's a bit of kind of nervousness around the anti-AI sort of hype. There's a huge nervousness around, the biggest one, I suppose, is the concern about cognitive offloading, that actually just will make us dumber. And if I'm the head of a school, do I really want to bring in a tool that makes my students dumber? Probably not. And then the other one, of course, is around, well, if we allow it in, kids are just going to use it to write their essays and they're never going to write anything again, well, which obviously links to cognitive offloading. But I think there's a lot of fear. And then the other one is the one I mentioned before, which is just around safety and security. So I think that the combination of those, probably, it's not very good. It's not very safe. It makes loads of mistakes. It's going to make my students dumb. Why would I want to bring it into my school?
Yeah. I'm really worried about a number of conversations with especially our sixth form and sixth form students. They're really using it, and they're using it, but we're not teaching them the best ways and how to use them.
They learn on TikTok and YouTube, and they learn from each other.
Yeah, the bulk of their learning comes
just using their initiative a lot of the time.
Yeah, of course they are. They just find the way through. You don't need. This is the thing. AI. The thing with AI is it will do the stuff for you, but also it will also teach you how to do the stuff. There are two strands. It's like with coding. AI will code, but also AI will teach you about the environment that you're working in, and how to do stuff, and what tools to use, and what database to use, and how to make the database speak, how to the back end speaks to the front end. That it will do both. And that's the thing. It's not just doing the output, it also is doing the teaching. So you're right. I mean, kids are just asking Chat, how do I do this? And it tells them.
Yeah. Do you think there's a slight divide? I know quite a few primary school teachers, my wife's one in particular, and there, from what I can see, is a slight difference in terms of it's very much about what they can get for the planning, for differentiation, for those kind of things that will help the teacher. Do you think that's generally what it's going to be longer term in primary school?
No,
or do you think
I don't think so. I think I actually think the primary schools I work with tend to be more innovative in the way in which they want to use these tools. And I think it's because they've got more freedom. Because as soon as you move into GCSEs, A levels, IB, you're very constrained. And SATs, key stage 3 SATs, etc. You become increasingly boxed, and I think it's maybe harder to innovate, and because you've got to get the kids through the exams. I think the primary end, there's more potential to be innovative, but I think they are definitely held back by just not having the tools available to use with the students. That will change. Of course, it's going to change. There's just obvious that there are going to be products released that are genuinely safe and that tick all the government boxes, and that people feel very confident and comfortable using with under 13s. And I think then we'll start to see possibly more, I don't know, or certainly similar, but I think it's only that's the main constraint that I'm noticing when I'm working with the schools, is just that they feel they can't use these tools because they're, it screams at 13 plus or 18 plus.
And do you feel that there's a real barrier in terms of the assessment? So you just are alluding to it there. If the assessments were to change, is that likely to remove one of the biggest barriers that we have?
So, well, it's the biggest barrier, isn't it? I mean, the university tail wags the secondary school dog, and has done forever, really. I mean, the university's been around a lot longer than schools. So I think that's definitely one of the reasons, that if you've got to get your kids through an exam, then, you haven't got time to do anything interesting or innovative or, useful. So you've got to get your kids through 10 GCSEs.
Universities are starting to change their assessment processes and the way they're starting to use AI more, and having things that students are allowed to use AI, and then they'll be assessed on that. So
yeah, it's more about admissions, though, isn't it? It's more about university admissions. It's UCAS.
yeah.
I mean, UCAS they don't, frankly, struggle. I mean, they're struggling from the conversations I've had with them. Just things like using plagiarism detectors. We even had JCQ just reiterating last month or in April, that it's okay to use plagiarism detectors. It really isn't okay to use AI detectors because they really don't work. Even the best ones just do not work. So and UCAS will, the admissions tutors in universities will be doing the same thing. They'll be running their personal statements through AI detectors, and it's just playing quite a dangerous game. So I think that until such time that the only way the universities will change, I'm pretty convinced about this. I might be wrong, but I feel quite convinced that this is probably what will happen. Is that the only way the universities will change their admissions processes is if they have to. And the only reason they'll have to is because kids will just stop going to them, because they just won't need to, because they will just go straight into work and they'll start earning a salary, and they won't want to end up with, was it £50,000, £48,000 average debt now in the UK? It's over $100,000 in the US. It's closer to 200 in some colleges. But £50,000 average debt.
It's an increase.
For what? Yeah. So I think what will happen is that universities will just have to slightly reinvent themselves because they will just be no longer be viable. Not all. Oxbridge, I think they'll be fine. Most Russell Group probably will be fine, but there'll be a lot of others that kind of championship and below, that sort of, Division 1, those sorts of universities, ex-polytechnics basically, who will actually, and we know they are because we know a lot of them are in huge debt because they became over-leveraged through, their big CapEx development programs, and now they're struggling because post-Brexit, those foreign students, and they're really suffering. And so I think we're probably going to see a bit of a market correction in the HE space in the next few years. And I wonder, and this I may be completely wrong about, I wonder whether that will lead to a change in what they will expect from secondary schools, because actually there'll be more vocational and there'll be more business incubators and there'll be more things that are actually useful to students, rather than just a course that will basically get them nothing other than debt.
And particularly given that a student, as you've alluded to, can get hold of a program that will teach them all the skills that they could ever possibly need, incubate their own business where they go.
I mean, we know that there are 9-10-year-old millionaires. They're very thin on the ground, but there are kids, teenagers making a fortune through setting up their own businesses. So it's so different from when we were growing up. I mean, we never had the opportunity to actually set our own business up and monetize our skills. Kids can do that now. So they don't need to go to university. I mean, some of them will of course go, and that's absolutely the right thing for them to do. I'm not saying we should ban university at all, but for many kids, it's just not the right thing for them to be doing.
I think so many children are socialized. I know I was socialized. You just see, it's just a social norm. You just see every kid going in certain places, and they all go to university. And it can be the same on the opposite. Certain schools, no one goes, and then they're not socialized into that. So you can get the two effects. Do you mind if we go back to the ChatGPTs and all the chatbots that we were talking about earlier? What's by the end of the year? Because I think it's going to be a big change based on what we were talking about earlier. What's coming for us potentially that we could give to students? Do you think in the next year?
I think, as I said, we will definitely start to see, and I think it comes out of the government's announcement. I think as soon as we've got some clarity over, this is what we would expect schools to use, which we're just going to see products arriving. I mean, it's inevitable, isn't it? It's like there's a demand for a certain type of product. So I think we're just going to start to see those products arriving. The coding, the ability for people like you and I to code, which obviously we were just chatting about before the show, that's a big deal. Because now, I'm an English teacher, but I can code a full stack web application and, have AI at the back end and blah, 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 and databases and what have you, vectorized and embeddings and all the kind of good stuff that you can do with AI now. That you can do, and you can do without any real sort of skill or talent, just with persistence and pig-headed determination and enormous amounts of patience. So we can do these things. So I think that's what will naturally happen is we will just start to see educators developing products that are actually useful, because of course they address a need that they know the pain points because they've lived them. They're not tech bros. They've lived through the pain, and so they know what will actually work. So I think my guess is the next 6 to 12 months we will start to see those. But what we will also start to see, and I think this is possibly even more interesting, I think, is we will start to see teachers just developing very small niche applications that they just need for one particular thing. So they'll just spin up an app really quickly that will just do one thing. And we're starting to see it. I've noticed over the last few weeks, Canva code, that came out. And all of a sudden, everyone's talking about Canva code. And that's great because you can just, we've had Claude Artifacts for a while as well. You can just spin up a quick app. You can just spin something up really quickly and then push it to the kids. And that then ticks that box and move on. It's not doing anything. It's not saving any data to the back end. It's not long term. So I think, but what I think we'll start to see is more of those, but a little bit more useful. So more kind of genuinely you'll literally be able to type in a few prompts and maybe it takes you a few hours, but you can create an iPad app, which is exactly what you need for that one particular part of the course. And then shelve it and it's not used till next year. So I think we'll see more and more of those little micro uses, as well as probably people coming out with sort of bigger products.
So do you see this almost pushing, again, I'll use the word cautiously, but do you see this pushing in almost a hybrid model where there's an awful lot more accessibility, which goes beyond just those 9 to 3:30 hours where things can be produced, which, as you say, you can interact with for that part of the course, and that learning is there, and it's there ad infinitum, and the student can go back to it. And
definitely, I mean, I can see, you know, the notional. It's almost like, I call it like a textbook on steroids type thing. You almost have like little sort of, you know, like an ultimate source of knowledge on one thing, like cell biology, for example, and the student, and that has everything that you need to learn about cell biology. But it's wrapped in a way that's really interesting. I'm not saying cell biology is fascinating, but it's often delivered in quite a dry way, just like a lot of subjects, not just biology, but most subjects can often be delivered in a very dry way. I think we'll start seeing kind of really interesting sort of these, as you say, these sort of hybrid models where we're mixing up multimedia and video and text and chatbots and mixing it all together in voice and video, and just starts to become this kind of interesting sort of multimedia experience. And I think you're right. I think then it will be a case of, you know, kid will just go home and they'll just be, you know, carrying on doing what they were doing. And it will move away from something I don't agree with, which my son, you'll probably hear them in the background because it's their bedtime. My son will have one of these apps. I won't name it, but it's just you have to do the. He says, well, we have to do the boring bit, and then we get to play the games. Like, what? So like you do your maths, and then you play a game afterwards, and then the game's not related to the maths at all. Complete nonsense. That's just not how gamification should work. But if you can actually properly create the motivation to learn inside of the app, then I think definitely we'll see this blurring, and that's what I expect to see. I expect to see a blurring of, you know, 9 to 3 just no longer as a thing. You just learn when you want to.
Is there going to be an element where the students are constantly entertained, and that is a problem in itself, isn't it? You know, we're worried about phones, we're worried about that constant dopamine hit. Is there potentially, if we do get that slightly wrong and we go too far the other side, they're going to be constantly entertained, and actually sitting in boredom is sometimes, I don't want to be bored in education, but do you know what I mean? They're too entertained in some sense.
Yeah. I mean, yes, absolutely. I think that, you know, we definitely don't want to. I mean, you're right. The sort of constant dopamine elevation that we have is a huge problem. I mean, a massive problem, because of course you then need to do more and more and to get these dopamine hits and, you know, more stimulation or what have you. So that's obviously a problem then, because then you just push into addiction, and then you're in a really bad place. So I think there has to be that balance. But I just think that if we move towards what I would consider a fairly straightforward solution, I suppose, which is just giving kids meaningful things to do that means something to them intrinsically, and then giving them the tools to accelerate their way through to a solution. That to me is not about entertainment. It's just about doing stuff that matters. So they won't need to be as entertained, because actually they're just doing things that matter to them. And, you know, I see it with my boy. I mean, when he's involved in something that matters to him, he's a completely different animal. You know, I talked about, I wrote a post a week or last week, I think it was, about we need to give students ownership of their spark. You know, they need to own that first spark, that first thing that sets them off. Because if we give it to them, it's not there. Everything that follows, they don't own. If we say you're going to do this project on, you know, the water on the water cycle, they don't own that. But if they discover it through their own meanderings, what my son did, he got really into a particular type of coding using Scratch, but it was because he was watching a YouTube video on one thing and something else was suggested to him, and he watched it and he was interested, and all of a sudden he was just this, like, you know, he was sparked and he was away to the races. So I think the notion of entertainment is really about filling time, isn't it? We entertain ourselves to fill time. But actually, if we're involved in something that we're genuine, basically what I'm talking about is flow. If you enter a flow state, then the notion of entertainment stops being a thing. It's just, you're just involved in this thing. And that's what I think we should be pushing all of our effort and energy into, is how can we allow kids to own their spark, and how can we create the conditions. And I think what adults should do, where adults fit in, is creating the conditions for then generating the spark, and then creating the conditions for flow, because kids are not able to regulate themselves in that way. I mean, adults, quite frankly, struggle most of the time. But we should be able to architect that so that they once they've got that spark and that idea, they've got the right conditions to go with it. And then I think we can just stand back.
Hopefully, I'm sure we can all see a system where AI can really enhance that and help us do that. And there's no doubt about it. It can individualize that learning miles better. And hopefully, in that future, that's what's going to come if we can use it effectively. I'm really excited about that.
So I'm just going to jump to one of the later questions, because this actually comes, I think it's a germane point to bring it in. So what should educators be doing then? What should we be doing to kind of prepare ourselves for where this is going to be heading? If we have this tool that can provide that spark, that can fuel a student's engagement in particular, which, as we know, the engagement crisis in education, I think, comes from the fact that we are just, as you say, putting things in front of them that they don't engage, and then trying to entertain them so they don't get bored with the thing. If we have this potential, what do we need to do to prepare ourselves, do you think?
I think the first thing that everybody needs to do is just to play with these tools as much as possible. Just play with them. They're quite fun. They're actually quite fun to use. I mean, use some of these tools. They've actually got a bit of a sense of humor. So you can actually play and just find out how they work, and just dig into the background of them, and understand what, there's some of the terms like retrieval augmented generation, and these are really important things. They're really important because this is the foundation of the systems that we're developing into the future. So I would say that teachers need to be curious. They need to be quite playful. They need to just feel comfortable and confident in themselves even before they start to introduce it to students. I think that's what teachers should be doing right now. Don't worry about the next few months or even the next year. We're not at the point where the whole system is going to fall apart just yet. We've got a good maybe 1 or 2 years before the education Armageddon hits us. But right now, just learn how to use them. You don't even need to be formally taught. You just have the confidence and the self-belief just to kind of open up ChatGPT or Claude or Google Gemini and just say, I want to do this. I'm not really sure how. Tell me how I do it. I've heard you, literally something like, I've heard you can plan schemes of work, but I'm worried they're going to be a bit bland, generic, and full of factual errors. Tell me how I can, how can we work together to produce something which is useful? And then just see what happens. Literally something that organic and sort of chatty. You don't need prompt engineering. Doesn't exist. It's not a thing anymore. It hasn't been really a thing since 3.5. I mean, it was a legacy term that computer developers, the engineers, the AI engineers were using the very early, like GPT-1, GPT-2, because it needed that degree of the precision with the prompting. It doesn't really need that anymore. And so you just chat with it, see how it works, see what it can and can't do. This is the big one, actually. Right now, you should be always pushing things to see how far they can go, because then you learn the limits. I'm doing it at the moment. I use Claude Code a lot when I'm coding, and I already know that there are limits to what it can do. And I'm working inside those limits, but it took me several weeks of playing with the tool before I understood, well, it can do this really well, but it's absolutely terrible at this. It's like people on social media who will say, it can't count the number of R's in strawberry. Well, of course it can't, because it's trained to the word, the smallest unit of meaning, which is a token, is virtually never a single word, and it's certainly never the letter R, because we never see the letter R as a single word in the English in the alphabet. We see the A, but we never see the R. So it's not trained to count letters, because it's not trained to the level of letters. It's trained to essentially the level of words or parts of larger words. And so it's not going to. Its architecture it means that it can't count the number of R's. So that's just an ignorance. And so I think we need to just be understanding some of this stuff, understanding what attention is, understanding how to write a clear and simple prompt. That's what teachers should be doing now, because it will be necessary. it will be a fundamental requirement. If you want to be a teacher, you need to understand how to use these tools well.
So it sounds like it needs to be in all of the training for teachers when they're first coming in, is ECTs and below. And
Well, that won't happen in a hurry, because I spoke to Jim Knight over a year ago now. So, I mean, he was the ex-education minister. And I asked him that question. He said, no, he said 10 years. He said, governments will work in a 10-year cycle. He said, there'll be no changes to teacher training for about the next 10 years. And that's not, that's not him kind of casting doom and gloom. It's just a fact. The government will take too long. And so this is down to schools. If they get ECTs, will need to be trained by the school, because they're almost certainly not in any hurry going to be trained by any college.
So the teachers are going to have to be the same as well. We're all learning on the job, aren't we? To say the least.
I mean, I think you've kind of answered this. What I was going to ask, I mean, like, do you feel that not just the regulation, because as we've talked about the fact that the regulation and the guidance certainly is toned about right, but do you feel that the institutions, like the like the training providers for teachers, like schools themselves, are we keeping pace? Is it even possible to keep pace with the innovations?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent it is. I mean, none of us can we? Let's face it. Mm-hmm. I mean, even those of us who are doing this all the time can't keep up with everything that's happening. I think it's impossible, really, for schools to feel like, but I don't think they have to, but I don't think that's an excuse to do nothing. I hear this, I mean, I'm not kidding you, I probably hear this every day. Oh, I'm really not very technical. Oh, no, I mean, this is just, way beyond me. I just, it's not something I'm ever going to be able to get the hang of. I mean, and if that's the school principal, you think, well, good luck to you. We can sometimes hide behind that kind of, I'm, Gen X and, I'm 50 odd years old. I can't possibly. I think that's an absolute nonsense. I think it's complete nonsense. I mean, I'm 54 and I just get on with it. The age is irrelevant. In fact, I'm seeing more younger teachers who are like, oh no, I'm really not very technical. I almost feel like it's a bit of an affectation that they almost put it on as like, oh yeah, no, I'm very anti-tech. Well, you might be anti-tech, but this stuff is here and it's just going to accelerate. And if you value your career and if you value your students' education, just get over yourself and start learning it. And even if fundamentally you disagree with it, and there are lots of parts about AI that I don't agree with, there's a plenty about AI that I deeply distrust. It doesn't care. AI doesn't care what you think. It's moving ahead nonetheless, and I think we have a moral obligation to do what we can to keep up.
I think the AI distrust is maybe another hour-long show potentially.
Yeah. Actually, kind of bouncing off the question about what do we as teachers need to do to prepare, what should we actually be teaching students then? Because what are the core fundamental skills that they're going to need in this new paradigm?
That's a really good question. I think there are lots of things they probably won't need, and there's a lot of kind of, for example, we have to reinvent computer science because
Sorry, I'm waiting for the comments to start pouring in.
Well, I mean, the facts speak for themselves. There was a recent study done literally just this week showing the number of computer science graduates that are unemployed. So that sector has taken the biggest hit early.
It won't be alone, though, will it?
Entry-level development is, I mean, the biggest challenge that we've got here, and I do recognize this, the biggest challenge is that you need to learn the stuff before you move up the tree. And if you're not learning the stuff at the basement, then how do you know what to do further up, as you go up? And I can understand that completely, and I don't think that's something that we've solved. But I think that definitely there are some things that we just simply not eradicate at all. I mean, computer science is the fundamental, possibly one of the most important subjects, but it's just like the basics of coding now. AI can do better than humans. It can. Maybe not the most advanced stuff, but the basics of coding AI can do better. My 9-year-old can code games now. He can code in Python, and he creates his own video games. Interesting. He's beginning to understand the code from the inside. So he puts it in and it spits it out and he reads it, and he's beginning to understand the sort of component parts of Python. So he's able to then go in and change some of the variables without having to go back to AI, because Python's actually quite simple code to learn. It's one of the more simple, structurally one of the more simple sort of code bases to learn. So I think that side, probably there are things that you simply will need to revise or maybe unlearn or maybe just eradicate. In terms of what we need to be teaching students, we need to be teaching them to become good problem solvers, good ability to think really critically. I mean, we throw the term critical thinking around. No one really knows often what that means. It's just a term that's one of the 5 C's of 21st century skills. But critical thinking will be very important, because we will need to be able to critically analyze a problem and come through to a solution. We'll need to be able to critically analyze what AI gives us. If we're working with AI, what it outputs, we need to be able to understand whether it's talking, crap, or whether it's actually giving us something which is factually correct. But I think one of the biggest skills that we need to teach students is how to be memorable for the right reasons. So that for me is the one of the number ones, because in a sea of AI generated content where everyone sounds the same and everyone speaks the same, and LinkedIn is awash with awful AI generated text, and everyone creates the same AI generated images and blah blah blah, it will be the students who stand out for the right reasons which will be the ones that will ultimately be successful, in my opinion. So examples are things like, you apply for a job, you need to do everything that you possibly can to make your CV or whatever memorable. So what do? Well, you need to get internships, you need to get work experience, you need to be meeting the right people, you need to get out from behind your laptop or your phone, look at people in the eyes, be able to present yourself well, online and also face-to-face. Social media profiles, absolutely critical. Every single student should be taught to cultivate a really powerful personal brand online. Those are the things that I think are going to be most important in the next few years, because ultimately, in a sea of bland nothingness that AI generates, I mean, awful, bland nothingness, it will actually be the people who bother to write their own posts and bother to write their own emails and bother to do their own presentations. I think those are the ones that are going to be ultimately the most successful.
Yeah, it's interesting that critical thinking, creativity, genuine writing. And when I say writing, I don't necessarily mean the mechanistic constructions of writing that we currently use, but genuinely, as you say, finding a voice are going to be the most important things that students can do. Ironically, AI may actually detach us from our screens more than we currently are.
It will. I mean, we are so governed by our thumbs on a screen right now. But we will more and more just be able to have these sorts of conversations where we will just be talking through problems and having this sort of voice that just comes back, maybe even some sort of avatar that looks quite realistic. So we just have, a person that we're just talking to. That feels like that's the next step. And we have this, the other thing that we haven't really talked about is the notion of agentic AI, that we will have this conversation with the AI here, but actually there's a whole team in the background of tools, and this is how Claude works. So Claude works with using tools. So it will go off and it will build a tool to solve a problem, and then it'll move on. That we'll just see that more and more. That we'll give AI jobs to do, and it will just go off, and it might take 5 minutes, it might take 5 hours, but then it will come back with the fully worked through solution. So that plus being able to talk, I think you're right. I'm hoping that we will actually be slightly more divorced from our screens.
It really is like a bit of a minefield when you start to think about some of this and the impact it can have. And if I think about our kids who are relatively the same age, that in 5 years to 10 years, my boy's only 6. When he leaves, what that world is going to look like when we've had 10 years of AI in jobs changing that fundamentally. And when you said to me there, actually the people that stand out will be the skills maybe away from AI. A little bit like that, when I make a student present in front of a class, that skill is brilliant, and not everyone can do it well. And actually still will be there.
I mean, the worst thing, the biggest mistake that the UK government made, previous UK government made, was forcing the e-bag, and forcing schools. And I was an academic deputy head at the time of a Ofsted outstanding academy, and the head was so torn because he basically said, well, we're going to have to remove drama, and we're going to have to remove art, and music is going to be very niche because we just have to focus on English, maths and science and humanities and a language. And I remember as an English and drama teacher, I was trained as an English and drama teacher, just finding that just horrific. And now, actually, those are the subjects that we need to be focusing most on, because those are the subjects that make us most human.
I mean, I'm lucky. I got out of the English game in time. I teach media studies, and I love my subject, and I think I think we both agree that teaching students to be able to express themselves is one of the most important things we can do. But I feel that I can do that in media studies. I felt somewhat constrained to an extent.
Media and film. I taught media and film. I was head of media studies. My second job was head of media studies, actually, in a media arts college. So I love teaching media.
We've got one more question that's come in from one of the people on LinkedIn. He said, how should we be helping students discover how AI can help them do something they actually want to do? That was quite an interesting one. It kind of pulls on some of the stuff we were talking about.
Yeah, it's a really good question.
Yeah.
I mean, if I reflect back just on, the time that I spent in Tunisia doing exactly that, so the notion of passion projects, I think that AI might be able to give you the spark initially. So, being able to just sort of go into a ChatGPT or a Gemini and just say, I'm really interested in such and such, but I want to explore it further. Give me some ideas, and it can just kind of lead you down some interesting sort of little cul-de-sacs or alleyways, and it could expand out or it might not. But I think when it comes to actually developing and expanding on that passion, then I think it's the perfect tool. Because it doesn't really matter what it is. It doesn't matter what that passion is. And it doesn't even matter what you say to it. You literally can just, I might get a sudden interest in photography, and I might be a particular type. I might really want to learn how to do like traditional black and white, darkroom photography. I wouldn't even know where to start. But I can now literally just sort of chat with ChatGPT, and it can kind of say, well, yeah, okay, the first thing you're going to need to do this. You need to get these chemicals, and here's a solution that you can use, and it will just talk you step by step. And which, by the way, step by step is one of the most useful phrases that you can use when you prompt, because it unlocks almost a mechanism within the models, which is kind of basically a slow down mechanism. And think through the problem, go step by step. I even use take a deep breath sometimes, and that seems to work. But the ability for just you can literally just do anything at any time with these tools. It doesn't matter what it is. That you can have the most niche, frankly bizarre, as long as it's legal, bizarre hobby that you want to indulge in. Actually, it's going to be a really good companion and a good tool for you. So yeah, I would just say whatever you want to do, just even if you're not sure where to start, just say it.
And if I went into what was not tomorrow, but at some point in the future, and the kids have an hour and I've got an hour, we say, what are you going to learn? It's your choice. Obviously within reason, within the schools.
It is interesting thing that so a guy called Nick Jackson, based in Adelaide, great guy, good Yorkshire guy, Yorkshireman, but based in, it hasn't lost his accent. He's been there forever. He's still broad accent. Great, he's a great guy. He introduced me to something called a Genius Hour. And what they do, and I think every school should have this, by the way, what they do every week, 1 hour in the week, could be any time in the week, completely random. They just announce Genius Hour, and the kids drop what they're doing, and they do that, and they work on their passion project for that hour. What a great idea!
That is a great idea. Wouldn't that be amazing? Yeah. Like, you'd love your kids to do that, wouldn't you? I'd love that.
The other one is Friday afternoons. Waste of time Friday afternoons. Nothing ever gets done. Kids hate Friday afternoons. Staff hate. Everyone's waiting for the weekend. Well, just collapse the curriculum every Friday afternoon and just do passion projects every Friday afternoon. What's the worst that can happen if you give over 2 hours a week really, honestly, what is the worst that can happen? Well, actually, probably nothing, but actually it could be transformative. So it's those sorts of things that I think schools could easily bring in for September. They're very, very low risk, but they're also potentially very high reward.
It's interesting. It would be a brave school that did it. I have to say, my school in Malaysia, that's exactly what we did. We aimed it around the Sustainable Development Goals, and we were trying to foster a sense of kind of community and environmental awareness. But it's exactly what we did. We took 2 hours, and that's where we're at.
I've got one more question about you, John. But I'm just going to introduce. I'm going to talk about our programmers for today. So just a reminder that if you want to sign up for the newsletter, the TTR newsletter, where we're obviously going to be on. 10,000 people already signed up, and it basically sends out your best 4 shows to have a listen to that week. So come on, pick us. And then you can see the link below. And then obviously John Cat, which we mentioned each time, the fantastic CPD resources that you can get on there, teaching and learning from all around the world. So visit the website and you can get 20% off on that code. So yeah, my one question is there a school, or you don't need to mention the school at all, but where do you think, or where's the best examples of use at this moment in time? Like, where are schools getting it really right? We've obviously talked about the policy is going to be there, that's going to be clear, it's going to be drip feeding down, but what are they doing that's different that potentially some of the other schools are not doing in a minute?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that right now, if you look at the Middle East, the UAE, particularly maybe Dubai, place like Dubai, because they're very pro-innovation there.
Sorry, I left Dubai last year. Obviously,
Oh yeah, you did that. I remember you writing about that. Yeah, I think you also wrote about regretting leaving Dubai at the wrong time. So I would say that the schools I'm engaged with and working with, various sort of bits and pieces of projects, they're the ones that seem to be the most up for innovation. Because the government, I mean, they've just announced that, everyone needs to have AI literacy training, that, there's an expectation that students have these AI tools. So I think they've created the right conditions for innovation. I think here in the UK, I'm seeing it in 1 or 2 independent schools. Not so many state schools, not because the desire isn't there, just because they haven't got the time and the resource to kind of commit to it. And I think they're too constrained by lots of sort of other factors. But yeah, I would say right at the moment, I'm seeing more innovation coming out of the Middle East than anywhere else. I think China's also been quite interesting. I've done a bit of work with some schools in China. I think there's a couple of groups of Chinese schools that are also doing some quite interesting stuff. Training their own AI. Building their own tools from inside of the school, so they kind of work for the school. That's probably where I'm seeing the most, but less so in the UK right now. I think that will change, but less so in the UK.
And that kind of leads us to the question we'll finish on. Not that we can predict the future, but if you were to predict the future, so where do you see things in 5 to 10 years? What would a school look like? Yeah, is it going to resemble anything that we currently have?
I mean, I'll pick up actually based on a comment that was made. I was just sort of looking through some of the comments here. Carl mentioned about, and we're social creatures. I fundamentally agree with that. I think that for me is the premise upon which we need to build any new education system, the notion of community. So I think, Carl, I'm in violent agreement with you there. The ideal, give you my ideal, is we actually move almost away from the notion of like large industrial style of schools towards much smaller collectives of people, of individuals, supporting students and supporting their growth. And my absolute ideal would almost be what I would call almost like a sort of form of work and learn collective, where you would have co-working spaces, learning spaces, families could come together for meals, mum and daughter could do a hobby, an activity together at the end of the school day. There could be that blurring slightly of boundaries, still safe spaces for kids to learn in that are separate, but actually the ability for kids and parents to come together. I think that would be really lovely. And seeing those developing, over time. And I know this is something I wrote on this about more than 2 years ago now. I could just kind of see that this is the way that things will naturally progress, because the more you the more you decentralize the organizing structures of education, so curriculum, timetable, lesson plan schemes work, etc. The more we decentralize that, the less you need the structures to support those organizing structures. You just don't need to have the class of 30, because you can actually you can loosen things. You probably would be able to get. We talk about 1 to 30 because that's roughly how many kids an adult can control before hell breaks loose based on our current system. But if you've got kids genuinely involved and genuinely in the flow state, you probably will find that actually you certainly need fewer the more highly qualified teachers. So we just start getting more adults coming in, maybe school leavers 18 plus can come and support, maybe the older students working with the younger students, so that you've got that passive supervision more, I suppose. And I think if we get to that point, then actually we're in a really interesting place, because we're going to almost feel like it moves back before the Industrial Revolution towards more of an agrarian. We get communities. I mean, I'm probably very utopian and probably completely unrealistic, but that's what I'd like to see happen. I'd like to see a slightly more community nurturing, and I think we will probably spend much less time on screens, and we probably will spend more time with each other in a face-to-face environment, because quite frankly, we're going to reach the point very soon where we can no longer trust anything that we see on a screen.
Oh, God, yeah.
We're almost there now. I mean, VO3 is pretty well given us the point where actually we look at a video, we don't know whether it's real or not. And I just think we're going to get to the point very soon where we simply will, as a society, say, we do not trust anything that we see on the screen, and therefore we will privilege face-to-face. So it could actually be a really good thing for us.
It's ironic, I think we said it before, but the advances in technology might bring us back to a kind of almost as you say, a pre-industrial and older form of existence. Village.
Yeah, the only way to survive. Right, on that note, thank you so much for coming on the show, Darren. Really appreciate it. We've, as always, learned loads. Yeah. It's just your chance. I follow you. I think you're, for me, on LinkedIn, one of the top people to follow, to learn. I've always taken some of your videos and gone away. Google Live was one of them. It's just if you can give everyone a little bit of a shout out to how they could follow you.
Yeah, so I mean, Darren/Coxon on LinkedIn. That's where I do most of mine. We have a website, compass.education, but I mean, most of the daily stuff that I do. I have a Substack as well, just Darren Coxon, Educate with an AITE Substack, where I write, but I always post everything through LinkedIn anyway. So LinkedIn's the place I dump all of my random thoughts. So that's the best place. Yeah, Darren/Coxon.
That's right. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining.
Yes, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
We'll look forward to seeing everyone. We should be on in a month's time again. So hopefully we'll see everyone else.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Darren.